This has been my kitchen.
Good evening, SonicBlu here for Cooking with SonicBlu, and I'm going to wrap your world in bacon tonight. Well, at least the recipe anyway. We're going to need 2 of those packages of bacon for what we got prepared for you tonight. So let's go over the things that we are needing here. We're needing a medium-sized bread pan, 2 packages of bacon, a pound of ground beef or ground turkey, and a small to medium-sized onion chopped. We're also going to need ricotta cheese or I should say either ricotta cheese or cottage cheese. And since we didn't have any ricotta cheese, we went with the next best thing, cottage cheese. And we're also going to need about 4 to 6 lasagna noodles. Now what we're going to do first is prepare our bread pan. And we're going to lay out our bacon just like this. We need to put the bacon starting from the center of the pan, going out of the pan, laying them down lengthwise, and letting the rest of the bacon just hang over the edge. Now, when we put our bacon down, we're going to need to overlap them or put them edge to edge. Overlapping is just fine too, but you don't want any spaces between bacon slices. That's why we're going to need 2 packages worth of bacon. Now when you have all your bacon laid out, that's what it should look like. And we're just going to give you a quick close-up of the bread pan, and this is what the inside of the pan should look like. Notice how all of the edges of the bacon are more gravitated toward the center. Now we're going to work on our ground beef or turkey. We're using a special ground turkey. This has been pre-seasoned with taco seasoning. But if you don't have any seasonings or you don't know what to use, just season it with salt and pepper. And you can use ground beef, you can use ground turkey. Anything works here. Come on, get out of there. Get out of there. Oh, yeah, there you go. Look at that, perfectly seasoned. All you got to do is just cook it. It's got the seasoning right in there. I've actually had this and it's actually pretty good. So anyway, what we're going to do is cook this ground turkey up until it's fully cooked. And you'll notice that as your ground turkey, well, if you're using this kind of ground turkey, as it cooks, the seasoning that you add will, of course, be blended into your meats as it cooks. And if possible, you want to maybe add just about a half a cup of water if you use a certain blend of seasonings, and if you use a lot of it, because that water will help absorb into your meats. But you could just season it with salt and pepper. That will be fine too. Just add it to taste, and you know what you like. There is no wrong way to season your ground beef, or ground turkey in this case. So now once we got that out of the way, we're just going to clean up a little bit around here and wait for our ground beef to cook fully, or ground turkey in this case. And you notice a lot of that juice has run out with the seasoning in it. And what we're going to do here is there's a lot of also a lot of fat in that juice too. So we're going to extract the juice, and we'll just do this right now. We're just going to drain our ground turkey, bring it back to the fire, We don't have to worry about losing any flavor because a lot of that seasoning is still in the ground turkey. And what we're going to do is we're going to add our pre-chopped onions. And we're going to get those cooking now. Now basically you want to cook this until the onion is starting to look translucent. And this is about a medium-sized yellow onion, yellow onion that we're using here. Want to make sure we get all the onion in there. Yes, even, it looks like some of it tried to hide in the bacon. Yes, we want all of our onion cooked. Come on, get out of there, you. Get out of there. Come on, there you go. Alright, now we're just going to stir this. Oh, found another stray. In you go. Come on, your friend too. There you go. Now we're just going to stir this in until your onion is nice and coated. And it's starting to already absorb some of those seasonings into the onion already. It's starting to turn a brownish color. So we're going to let this cook. We're going to stir this in really good and let it cook for a bit. And we're going to stir this occasionally. Want to make sure you don't burn your onion here. Now once you got your onion fully stirred, and it looks like it's well coated with the seasonings there, we're just going to let this cook for a bit. And while it's doing this, we're going to go on to our next step. And around this time, excuse me, and around this time what you might want to do too is start to get your water boiling for your lasagna noodles. That's what we're doing here. We're going to be needing 4 to 6 lasagna noodles. 4 of them will be perfect, but I always cook an extra 2 in case some of them break. So we got 6 of them there. There they are. So we're just going to go ahead and set those aside. Wait for our water to boil a bit. And while we're doing that, let's preheat our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Oops, that's 380. That's 375. Okay. So we're going to preheat our oven to 375. And just waiting for that water to boil a little bit. Now you can add salt to this to help break down the starch, and a little oil to help prevent those noodles from sticking. And what you want to do is you want to carefully lay your lasagna noodles down, and if you don't have a big enough pot for your noodles, I recommend a medium to large size pot. But if you don't have a big enough pot, you have to pretty much do this slowly. You have to let the water soften the noodle a bit, and then when the bottom part gets softened enough to being in the water, you gently push the rest of those noodles into the pot, so that way the rest of those noodles will be start to get the dry parts soaking in the water, so that way you can fully submerge your lasagna noodles without breaking them. You have to be very careful about this if you don't have a big enough pot. And eventually, you'll be able to get them all to submerge, and they'll be cooking up nicely. Now, we're looking about 10 minutes of boiling time to get them to about al dente, and that's about al dente right there. We're just using a pair of tongs to test its flexibility, and if you can pick it up out of the pot and shake it a bit like that, it's pretty much safe to say it's al dente. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this over to the sink, and we're going to drain off all the hot water. And then what we want to do is we want to introduce cold water immediately into these noodles. And we want to stop them from cooking, so we're going to shock these noodles. And getting one of those strainers would definitely help. Yeah, that's looks like what I'm going to need here. Just a minute, let me go get it. I really love this strainer too, by the way. It's really come in handy. And there you go. You just put that on the edge of the pot. Tip it out, all that water gets drained out of there, and all your noodles stay in the pot. What's not to love about that? Okay. Now that we've drained out all of our hot water, we're going to introduce cold water immediately into those noodles. Now, unlike the other recipe where we had those macaroni noodles, there's not that many noodles in here that'll turn that water back into hot. So we only needed to rinse this through once with cold water. And that immediately brought our noodles to cold. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill up the pot with cold, and that should be enough to cool down those noodles. And you always want to test the water too by dipping your hand in. If it feels hot, then you got to drain it out and try it again. But if it's cold enough to the touch and you can pick up your noodles without burning your fingers off, then you know they're cool enough to handle. But the pot may still be hot, so keep them mitts on and drain out all the cold water. And, of course, that strainer comes in handy. Yes, we want to make sure we get every bit of water out of there, as much as we can get. Alright, so now that we got our cool noodles, we can now safely handle them and lay them down into our bread pan. We're going to need to lay this down as our first layer. And it will take 2 noodles side by side. So lay down 2 of your lasagna noodles side by side. They can overlap if they need to. And then we're going to take a good spoonful of our ground beef or ground turkey mixture. We're just going to lay it over on the top of those noodles. Now we got about 1 pound of ground turkey here. So a half a pound for this layer and a half a pound for the next layer. You just basically got to divvy up your supply. Now we have 1 large jar of tomato sauce, which does have meat in it. This came from a recipe we had prior, so we had plenty of leftover sauce to use. And this is about a large jar's worth, or an average sized jar's worth of sauce. So we're going to use half of the container of sauce for the first layer, and the rest of it will go on the second layer. So now you want to reach for your ricotta or cottage cheese in this case. And you want to layer down your cottage cheese in a single layer right over the sauce. This recipe would be a lot better with ricotta. I'd prefer to use ricotta, but if you don't have it, cottage cheese works just as good. And boy, do we have a lot of cottage cheese. Okay, so once you're satisfied with the amount of cottage cheese that you are laying down, then we're ready for the next step, and that's to repeat these steps that you just did. 2 lasagna noodles down on top of the cottage cheese layer, and put them edge to edge. They can overlap. Once again, they can overlap, and chances are you'll have part of those noodles kind of hanging out of the bread pan there, but that's okay too. Now we're going to take the rest of our ground beef mixture, or ground turkey mixture, and layer that on top of the second layer of lasagna noodles. And we're just going to use the rest of that in there. After all, they say, waste not, want not. If you can put all of that in your lasagna, best to do it that way, and you won't have to worry about leftovers. Okay, so once you get that evenly distributed, we're on to the next step, and the next step is the rest of that sauce. And it looks like it's not going to all fit, but trust me, it will. We're just going to take that layer of sauce and just kind of slop it all over until it's nice and evenly coated and distributed over our ground turkey mixture. And we're just going to use the rest of that up. And there you go. Perfect. Well, almost perfect. Still have just a little bit we can get out of there. And there we go. More? Alright, scrape it all out of there. Never have too much sauce. Alright. And finally, you guessed it, another layer of cottage cheese. So once you lay down this final layer of cottage cheese, and if you really wanted to, you can lay down a couple extra lasagna noodles, if you really feel confident about that. But we already have plenty with the 4. The other 2 were just in case our lasagna noodles broke. and they actually did break. We couldn't use them. They fell apart. That's okay. That's why we cook extra. So we're going to spread our layer of cottage cheese around to make sure it's nice and fully covered there. And now what we're going to do with our bacon is we're going to take and we're going to wrap the top parts of the bacon all the way around until it is completely covered and you don't see that layer of cottage cheese anymore. This is why we say it's just perfectly fine to overlap the bacon. Make sure all that bacon covers up everything. You don't want to see one speck of white. What you want to see is just solid bacon. Once you go all the way around and going from the outer edge to the center again, you will find that you will have just enough bacon to completely cover your lasagna. And that's exactly what we want to have. So just go around the edge, one strip of bacon at a time. Make sure it's all covered up. You can go crisscross if you want to, but as long as all of your bacon strips cover up your lasagna, that will be just perfect. Okay, there we have it. You don't see one speck of cottage cheese because it's all covered with the bacon, which is okay to overlap your bacon if need be. We're just going to clean up a little bit, and there you have it. There's our covered lasagna. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stick this into the oven for a while. We're going to bake this for about 35 to 45 minutes. And before you close that door, we need to get something else. Now, this is going to be very greasy because of all that bacon. And all that grease is going to run right down. So you're going to need a baking tray. So slide that right underneath on the second shelf there. Or if you really wanted to save the top rack, let's put the bread pan directly on top of the baking sheet. And that way any grease will collect right into that pan and won't drip down into onto the rack, which will keep our rack clean. Close up the oven, and we're going to wait for 35 to 45 minutes. Or until your bacon is cooked to the consistency that you like. Some people like it crispy, some people like it a little less crispy, but it is up to you on how well done you want your bacon, just looking at the top of it. Now please note, it is perfectly normal for your bacon to be perfectly soft underneath all of that food. It's not going to become crisp like on the top, because the top is exposed to direct heat. The bottom part of your bacon is going to be covered up with a lot of food and moisture and sauce, so it's not going to crispen up. It's going to be soft. It's going to cook up soft. But the top will get all the crispiness because it's exposed to the direct heat of the oven. So what we're going to do here now is for our final step, before we are ready to serve this up. What we're going to do now, well, you can see some of the cottage cheese did leak out of that, but that's okay. That's okay. Because we're going to fix it up right now by putting a layer of shredded cheese on the very tippy top of our bacon-covered lasagna to make it even more cheesy. And let me tell you, this step is a must. If you love cheese and you like a cheesy lasagna, this is a must. Now, unfortunately, we did not have any mozzarella. I would recommend mozzarella for this because it's stringy, it's gooey, it's thick, it's flavorful, and it goes perfect with this recipe. But we didn't have any mozzarella on hand, so we're using a taco blend mix, which still turned out good because we had taco seasoning in our ground turkey, so it worked out. So we're going to cover this as much as we can and spread our cheese out. So you're not going to get very much cheese on the top of that, but it will be cheesy enough. Because, I mean, let's face it, this thing is overwhelmed with ingredients. So any extra that you put on top will be a miracle. Now notice how much grease collected in our baking pan down there. It is definitely a good idea and a good rule of thumb to always include a baking pan to put under your bread pan when you make this recipe. It is a necessity. You have to do this, otherwise you'll get a very messy oven, and who wants to clean up all of that? So back into the oven it goes, and we're going to cook this for probably about another 10 to 15 minutes or until the cheese is melted to your liking. Now, like I said, some people like a cheesy, stringy texture. Some people like it more well done, but you know what you like. So about 15, maybe 20 minutes of cooking time, or just enough to melt that cheese to your liking. And look at the results. Oh my, I am in heaven right now. My arteries are going to suffer, but you know what? In times like this, look at that. I know it's probably not the most healthy meal in the world. I know this. I get it. But sometimes you really have to indulge in some really, really bacony good recipes. And this is one of them. If you love your bacon, this is one that I definitely recommend. It's filling. It's flavorful. It's got tons of ingredients, and as you can see, we're having just a little bit of difficulty bringing it up. See what I mean about how soft that bacon is underneath? Unfortunately, my lasagna fell apart as I was serving it, but I served it hot. It's best to leave this for about 10 to 15 minutes before serving. Just to let it, just let everything settle in there, and it could be a lot easier to serve for a better presentation. But I was in a bit of a hurry to get this done, so I wanted to serve everything up right away, so it looks like it all fell apart, and it sure did. But it eats the same. It eats the same, but I'm a stickler for presentation as well. So if you're a stickler for presentation, I definitely recommend at least a 10 to 15 minute wait before serving, and being very, very careful when you get that first slice out of there. Oh yes, this is going to be a very filling meal indeed. Now we're going to use the knife to help catch as much of that as possible. It's filling, it's slipping out all over the place. I was amazed I didn't spill too much of that food getting it over to the plate there, but I couldn't help it. This was a delicious meal. I didn't mind the extra mess. I'm just really piling it onto that plate. And folks, to be honest, I only ate half of that plate's worth. I put the rest of it in the refrigerator, and I had the rest of it today. So, yeah, it is quite filling. Very filling. So once you have enjoyed putting this together and baking it, and the smells just coming from your oven, that's the best part of cooking. What right about here is when it's almost done, when you can start to smell the bacon. When you can smell bacon in your kitchen, you know it's almost done. That's a good time to go check on it. But man, I am just making a mess over on my plate. Look at that, just piling up there. That is definitely not one for presentation, let me tell you, folks. But, oh, you cannot resist just a blend of flavors. You got your ground beef, you got sauce, you got cheese, and the best part of it at all, bacon. Oh, ho, ho, ho. If you're a fan of bacon, this is a must recipe to make it. I don't recommend making it very often, but if you like your bacon and you really want to indulge, this is the meal to indulge yourself in bacon. I know a lot of people who would love to be on a full-blown bacon diet, but not only is it not good for you to eat all the time, but you can get burned out on it real easily, and then it won't seem as good anymore. So I definitely recommend just pacing yourself when it comes to this recipe. But mostly because of the health concerns, because you could clog an artery with this meal. Okay, now if you're wondering why that bowl is dirty, because well, one of the people that we share the house with had already had some spaghetti that we made out of that sauce. Remember when I said the sauce was a leftover from another recipe? And he had some of that leftover spaghetti in that bowl. So what he did was he set aside the bowl when he was done with it and says, I want some of that stuff, just put it in my bowl, and it'll mix with the sauce and the grease and the stuff that I had in there beforehand. So that's why I'm putting it into a dirty bowl. But keep in mind, folks, that bowl was not dirty for too long. And look at the bounty of food on that plate. Now it's time to dip in and give this a try. Look, you can see the steam coming off of that too. And here we go, first bite. And it is just a bacon, blissful, heavenly flavor. A mix of lots of really great flavors. You got the flavor of your seasoned ground turkey, the onion, the cheese, and of course the bacon. It's just everything coming together and tasting so good. But like I said, folks, you definitely want to pace yourself with this recipe. You don't want to make this all the time, but this is a good thing to make once in a blue moon. So if you can tolerate that amount of bacon, I definitely recommend trying this out at home. You may never know. You might come away with something you might enjoy that you've had millions of times before but never thought to wrap it up in bacon. So, with all of that being said, I'm just going to cut on out of here. Enjoy the rest of my bacon-wrapped lasagna, which is oh so good. I hope everybody enjoys this recipe. And this is SonicBlu for Cooking with SonicBlu. See you next time. And remember, if you're not cooking good, you're not eating good.